The mining equipment had been acting strange all week, producing sounds that made Dr. Rebecca Hayes pause during her geological surveys of the crystal caves on Kepler 442c. The planet's twin suns cast eerie shadows through the translucent cave walls, creating patterns that shifted like living things across the rocky floor. She adjusted her headlamp and continued deeper into the unexplored sections, following mineral readings that promised rare Earth deposits, crucial for humanity's expanding colonies. 3 hours into her survey, Rebecca heard something that made her blood run cold. A weak, whimpering cry echoing from somewhere ahead. The sound was unlike anything in her xenobiology database, too intelligent for local fauna, yet too desperate to ignore against every protocol. Drilled into colonial researchers, she followed the sound deeper into the cave system. Her scanner picked up unusual heat signatures ahead, concentrated in what appeared to be a natural chamber. The sight that greeted Rebecca in that hidden chamber would haunt her dreams for weeks. A creature the size of a house cat lay crumpled against the cavern wall, its breathing shallow and labored. Scales that should have gleamed like polished metal appeared dull and lifeless, while wings, actual wings, hung broken at impossible angles. The creature's eyes, when they briefly opened, held an intelligence that stopped Rebecca's heart. This was no ordinary planetary fauna. This was a dragon hatchling, something that existed only in humanity's oldest legends and newest nightmares. Rebecca's hands trembled as she ran her medical scanner over the injured creature. Multiple fractures, severe dehydration, internal bleeding, and what appeared to be infected bite marks along its tiny flanks. The readings suggested the hatchling had been attacked and abandoned, left to die alone in this remote cave. The scanner estimated it had, perhaps hours left to live. Every instinct screamed at Rebecca to report this discovery immediately. The colonial authority would want to study this creature, document its physiology, understand its species. Dragon-like beings had been theorized but never confirmed on any human-settled world. This discovery could change everything. Humanity thought they knew about life in the galaxy. But as Rebecca knelt beside the dying hatchling, watching its labored breathing grow weaker, her human heart overruled her scientific training. When the creature's eyes opened again and seemed to focus on her face, she saw something that transcended species barriers, a desperate plea for help from one living being to another. "I'm going to get you out of here, little one," Rebecca whispered, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. The hatchling's response was barely audible, a soft chirping sound that might have been curiosity or hope. Rebecca carefully lifted the creature, amazed by how light it felt despite its obvious bone density. Her emergency medical kit contained basic supplies for human injuries, but she would have to improvise everything for this alien physiology, getting back to the research outpost without detection required every stealth skill Rebecca had learned during her military service before joining the Colonial Research Division. She waited until the night shift change, when most of the team would be focused on their instruments rather than personnel movements. Her quarters, located in the outpost's research wing, provided the privacy she needed. Rebecca spent the first night fighting to keep the hatchling alive. Her basic medical supplies seemed laughably inadequate against the creature's injuries, but human determination proved more powerful than proper equipment. She fashioned splints from equipment parts, used her own pain medication to ease the creature's suffering, and shared her meal rations when the hatchling showed interest in her. Protein bars. The second night brought fever. Emergency cooling packs from the medical bay helped, but Rebecca found herself lying beside the creature, using her own body heat to regulate its temperature when the fever broke into dangerous chills. The hatchling's breathing improved slightly, and its eyes tracked her movements with growing awareness. The third night, something remarkable happened. The hatchling's scales began showing hints of color, shifting from lifeless gray toward what Rebecca thought might be copper tones. When she offered it water, the creature drank eagerly, and its wing movements suggested bones were beginning to heal. The most amazing change was behavioral. The hatchling had begun responding to Rebecca's voice, turning its head when she spoke and making soft trilling sounds when she approached. Rebecca realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in human-alien relations. This creature, which should have seen her as either threat or food source, was beginning to trust her completely. When she had to leave for mandatory team meetings, the hatchling would cry softly until her return. When she slept, it would curl against her arm, seeking comfort and warmth from the being who had saved its life. On the fourth morning, Rebecca woke to find golden eyes staring directly into hers. The hatchling had positioned itself on her pillow, close enough that she could feel its warm breath against her cheek. When she moved, it made a sound she could only describe as a purr, and its scales rippled with colors she was beginning to recognize as contentment. "Hello there, Ember," Rebecca said, the name coming to her spontaneously. The hatchling's response was immediate, a musical trill that seemed to express recognition and approval. It had accepted both the name and the being who had given it. Rebecca felt something shift inside her chest, an emotional bond forming that she knew would change both their lives forever. As Rebecca prepared Ember's morning meal, she realized she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. She had saved an apex predator's life, nursed it back to health through pure human compassion, and formed a bond that transcended every regulation and protocol in colonial authority books. The tiny dragon that watched her every move with intelligent golden eyes was no longer just an alien specimen, he was family. The implications terrified and thrilled her equally. Ember would grow, possibly to enormous size, and his species' capabilities remained completely unknown. But as she watched him carefully eat from her hand, his scales glowing with warm copper tones that seemed to reflect contentment and trust, Rebecca knew she had made the only choice her human heart could accept. She had chosen love over protocol, compassion over career security, and emotional connection over scientific detachment. In doing so, she had demonstrated something uniquely human, the ability to see family where others might see only alien danger outside her quarters. The research outpost continued its routine operations, unaware that one of their team members had just formed the most significant interspecies bond in human history. Ember settled against Rebecca's arm for his morning nap, his gentle purring filling the small room with sounds of perfect trust and growing affection. 6 months had transformed everything about Rebecca's life on the research outpost. Ember now stood as tall as her waist, his wingspan impressive enough to create shadows that danced across her quarters when he stretched. His scales had developed into magnificent copper plates that shifted through bronze and gold, depending on his emotional state, and his intelligence had grown at a pace that left Rebecca constantly amazed. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Ember's appetite had increased dramatically, requiring Rebecca to request additional food supplies under the pretense of increased metabolic research requirements. His natural curiosity led to several destroyed pieces of equipment, though he had learned to recognize Rebecca's disapproval through her tone and body language. Most surprisingly, Ember had begun displaying complex emotional responses that seemed almost human in their depth. "Ember, no," Rebecca said firmly, as the young dragon approached her delicate spectrometer array. His head tilted, scales shifting to a subdued amber that Rebecca had learned indicated understanding and mild disappointment. He settled back on his haunches, making soft clicking sounds that seemed to be his way of acknowledging her command. The other researchers had initially reacted with terror. When Rebecca finally revealed Ember's existence, Dr. Marcus Webb, the team's senior geologist, had actually fainted when Ember first emerged from Rebecca's quarters. During the emergency meeting that followed, Rebecca had presented her documentation of Ember's development, intelligence, and remarkable gentleness around humans. "This creature is an apex predator, Hayes," Dr. Patricia Stone had argued, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Its species could have capabilities we can't imagine. You're endangering the entire team." Rebecca had let Ember demonstrate his understanding of human communication. He had responded to verbal commands, shown emotional recognition of different team members, and, most importantly, displayed clear protective instincts focused specifically on keeping humans safe from harm. His scales would shift to warning colors when detecting potential dangers, and he had already prevented 2 equipment failures that could have caused serious injuries. The breakthrough moment came during a cave expedition 3 weeks after Ember's introduction to the team. Rebecca was collecting mineral samples in a particularly unstable section when a support beam, weakened by mineral extraction, began to give way. The massive boulder it supported started falling directly toward her position. Ember's response was instantaneous. His roar shook the entire cavern as he launched himself between Rebecca and the falling stone. His claws found purchase on the cave walls while his body formed a protective arch over her. His scales blazed with colors Rebecca had never seen, brilliant orange streaked with crimson, while his eyes seemed to burn with protective fury. The boulder struck Ember's back, with enough force to crack stone, but his powerful frame absorbed the impact. Rebecca found herself unharmed beneath his protective stance, awed by the realization that this magnificent creature had risked his life without hesitation to save hers. "Team members, protect each other," Dr. Webb said quietly afterward, watching Ember carefully groom a small wound on his shoulder. That's exactly what he did. From that moment, the research team's attitude toward Ember shifted completely. They began including him in their daily routines, and several members started learning to recognize his emotional color displays. Dr. Stone, despite her initial fears, became fascinated by Ember's problem-solving abilities and began documenting his cognitive development. Ember's learning capacity proved extraordinary. He mastered basic human tools, learned to operate simple equipment, and developed an understanding of the team's work routines that bordered on precognitive. When Rebecca worked late in the laboratory, Ember would bring her forgotten meals. When team members showed signs of fatigue or stress, he would position himself nearby, his gentle purring seeming to provide comfort. The most remarkable development was Ember's emotional sophistication. Rebecca began to understand that his color changes were actually a complex language, expressing nuanced feelings. Bronze indicated contentment, silver suggested curiosity, gold showed affection, and that brilliant orange appeared only when those he cared about faced danger. He had also developed distinct behaviors for different team members, playful with Dr. Webb, respectfully cautious around Dr. Stone, and completely devoted to Rebecca. "He's not just intelligent," Rebecca wrote in her research notes. "Ember demonstrates emotional complexity that rivals human capacity for forming relationships. His protective instincts seem to extend to anyone he recognizes as part of his social group. But his primary bond remains focused on the individual who saved his life." Rebecca's documentation became increasingly detailed as she realized the broader implications of her relationship with Ember. Here was proof that humans possessed a unique capacity for forming beneficial partnerships with apex predators through emotional connection rather than dominance or control. Ember hadn't been trained or conditioned to protect humans. His loyalty had developed naturally through trust and affection. The colonial authorities' interest in Rebecca's work grew accordingly. Her regular reports now reached high-level administrators who were beginning to understand that humanity might have discovered something more valuable than new mineral deposits or strategic planets. They had found evidence of their own species' greatest strength, the ability to form emotional bonds that transcended biological barriers. Ember seemed to sense the attention his presence generated. When official communications arrived, his scales would shift to alert silver, and he would position himself protectively near Rebecca during video calls. His intelligence was clearly capable of understanding that these conversations involved decisions about his future and Rebecca's work. "We're a team now, aren't we?" Rebecca said one evening as Ember settled beside her workstation, carefully arranging his bulk to avoid disturbing her equipment. His response was the warm gold color that meant deep affection, accompanied by the gentle purring that had become Rebecca's favorite sound in the universe. As she continued her research, Ember's steady presence reminded her that she had accomplished something remarkable. She had proven that love could bridge any gap, even the one between species that had never before encountered each other. The young dragon that watched her work with devoted golden eyes represented more than just an unprecedented scientific discovery. He embodied humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, the capacity to turn potential enemies into family through nothing more than genuine care and emotional honesty. The medical scanner's results made Rebecca read them 3 times before the reality sank in. 8 weeks pregnant. She sat in the outpost's medical bay, staring at the display while her world shifted around her. The timing couldn't have been worse, or perhaps more perfect, depending on perspective. Her relationship with David, a terraforming engineer stationed on the next planet over, had been conducted mostly through long-distance communication during his brief visits to the outpost. Rebecca's first thought wasn't about career implications or colonial regulations. It was about Ember. The dragon had grown to the size of a small shuttle over the past year, his intelligence and emotional bonds with the team deepening daily. How would he react to this change? More importantly, how would Colonial Command respond to a pregnant researcher living in close contact with an apex predator? The answer came within hours of Rebecca submitting her mandatory medical report. Administrator Helen Cross appeared on the communication screen with an expression that mixed concern with bureaucratic determination. Dr. Hayes, congratulations on your pregnancy. However, Protocol 77 Alpha requires immediate relocation of expecting personnel to secure medical facilities. Your current assignment poses unacceptable risks to both you and your unborn child. Rebecca felt her stomach drop. Administrator Cross, with respect, Ember poses no threat to me. He's been my constant companion for over a year. His protective instincts are... Dr. Hayes. Cross interrupted. That creature is an undocumented apex predator. We cannot authorize a pregnant woman to remain in its vicinity, regardless of your previous experiences. Transfer orders are already being prepared. You'll be relocated to Research Station Beta Prime within the week. The conversation that followed grew increasingly heated. Rebecca argued that separating her from Ember would cause psychological trauma to both of them, potentially damaging the most significant interspecies relationship in human history. Cross countered with safety regulations and liability concerns that seemed to treat Ember as nothing more than a dangerous animal. You don't understand, Rebecca said, her voice rising. Ember isn't just some creature I'm studying. He's family. Breaking our bond now would be cruel to both species. Everything we've learned about human-alien cooperation comes from our relationship. Dr. Hayes, your emotional attachment is understandable but unprofessional. The creature will be relocated to a proper xenobiology facility for continued study. You need to focus on your pregnancy and your health, not on maintaining relationships with dangerous alien life forms. Rebecca ended the communication feeling sick with more than morning sickness. She found Ember in their usual spot overlooking the planet's smaller moon, his massive frame silhouetted against the aurora dancing through the thin atmosphere. His scales showed the deep blue color that indicated contemplative moods, and Rebecca wondered if he somehow sensed the coming changes as she approached. Ember's head turned toward her, and his scales immediately shifted to concerned silver. He made the low, questioning sound that meant he detected distress in her emotional state. Rebecca had learned that dragons possessed incredible sensitivity to human biochemical changes. Ember often knew she was upset before she fully realized it herself. Ember, we need to talk, Rebecca said, settling beside his massive foreleg. His response was immediate and startling. Instead of his usual attentive posture, Ember carefully lowered his great head until it rested near Rebecca's midsection. His scales flickered through colors Rebecca had never seen before, soft pastels that seemed to indicate wonder and protective concern. His next action left her speechless. Ember began producing a sound she had never heard from him before, a subsonic humming that seemed to resonate through her entire body. The vibration was soothing, almost hypnotic, and Rebecca realized with shock that Ember had somehow detected her pregnancy before she had even suspected it herself. His behavior over the past week suddenly made sense. The extra gentleness, the way he had started walking more carefully around her, his insistence on bringing her food at regular intervals. You knew, didn't you? Rebecca whispered. Ember's scales shifted to the warm gold that meant deep affection, but overlaid with protective orange. His next move was even more remarkable. He carefully arranged his massive body around Rebecca, creating a warm shelter, while keeping his humming at a frequency that seemed to ease the nausea she had been experiencing. Over the following days, Rebecca watched Ember's behavior transform in ways that amazed her and the research team. He became hypervigilant about her safety, positioning himself between Rebecca and any potential hazards. His already careful movements around humans became almost impossibly gentle, and he seemed to anticipate her needs before she expressed them. When morning sickness struck, Ember would appear with smooth stones heated by his internal fire, arranged at just the right temperature to ease her discomfort. When she worked late, he would gently nudge her toward rest. When she showed signs of stress about the impending separation, his calming purr would help regulate her breathing and heart rate. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Stone observed, watching Ember carefully adjust his position to avoid jarring Rebecca as she rested against his side. "He's demonstrating proto-parental behaviors toward both Rebecca and her unborn child. This level of cross-species empathy shouldn't be possible." Dr. Webb was equally fascinated by Ember's adaptive responses. "Look at his scale patterns when Rebecca's nearby. They've developed new color variations that seem specifically related to her pregnancy. He's not just recognizing her condition, he's emotionally invested in it." Rebecca's documentation during this period became some of her most important work. She recorded Ember's behavioral changes, his apparent ability to monitor her health through senses humans didn't possess, and most significantly, his clear understanding that she carried new life that would become part of their family unit. The most touching moment came when Rebecca received her final transfer orders. Ember's scales immediately blazed with the orange-crimson combination that indicated extreme protective anger, and for the first time in months he produced a sound that resembled his original roar. But when he looked at Rebecca, seeing her tears, his colors shifted to the gentle pastels he had developed specifically for her pregnancy, and his anger transformed into deep sadness. "I won't let them separate us," Rebecca said, her hand resting on Ember's great head. "You saved my life, and now you're protecting the most precious thing I'll ever carry. We're family, and families don't abandon each other." Ember's response was the complex color display that had become their private language for "always together," followed by the softest purr he could produce. Rebecca realized that regardless of Colonial Command's orders, she had found something more valuable than career advancement or regulatory approval. She had discovered that love truly could transcend any barrier, even the one between species. As she prepared her formal refusal of the transfer orders, Rebecca knew she was risking everything. But watching Ember carefully position himself to shield her from a sudden cold wind, she also knew she was fighting for something that made all the risk worthwhile. A bond that proved humanity's greatest strength lay not in conquest but in the courage to love without boundaries. Lightning split the dark sky as Rebecca felt the first sharp contraction tear through her body. The storm had been building for hours, turning the usually calm atmosphere of Kepler 442c into a maelstrom of wind and electrical discharge. What should have been a routine transport to the medical facility on the neighboring moon was now impossible. No shuttle could navigate through the electromagnetic chaos surrounding the planet. Transport grounded indefinitely, came the crackling voice through the communication system. "Storm intensity beyond safe flying parameters. Medical team cannot reach your location." Rebecca gripped the edge of her workstation as another contraction hit, stronger than the first. Dr. Stone and Dr. Webb moved frantically around the outpost's small medical bay, gathering supplies and trying to establish communication with off-world medical support. The irony wasn't lost on Rebecca that she was about to give birth in the same place where she had once saved Ember's life. Ember himself had been agitated all day, his scales cycling through colors Rebecca had never seen before, deep purples mixed with anxious silver. When the first contraction hit, his reaction was immediate. His massive form positioned itself near the medical bay entrance, creating a barrier. Between Rebecca and the storm raging outside, his internal temperature rose, turning the entire area into a warm sanctuary despite the power fluctuations affecting the outpost's heating systems. "The backup generators are failing," Dr. Webb reported, his voice tight with concern. "We're losing environmental controls," as if responding to the crisis. Ember's body began producing more heat than Rebecca had ever felt from him. His scales took on an internal glow, radiating warmth that kept the medical bay at a perfect temperature for human comfort. When the lights flickered and died, Ember's bioluminescent patterns provided gentle illumination that was somehow more soothing than artificial lighting. Rebecca's labor progressed faster than anyone expected. Between contractions, She watched Ember's remarkable adaptations to the situation. He positioned his great bulk to block the cold drafts seeping through the outpost's storm-damaged seals. His massive wings extended to create additional barriers, while his body heat maintained the sterile environment needed for safe delivery. "Rebecca, your vitals are excellent despite the circumstances," Dr. Stone said, checking her portable medical scanner. "Your stress levels are remarkably low for someone giving birth during a planetary storm." Rebecca knew why the subsonic humming Ember had developed during her pregnancy had evolved into something even more sophisticated. He was producing rhythmic vibrations that seemed to naturally regulate her breathing and heart rate. His presence had become a source of calm strength that made the pain manageable and the fear almost non-existent. When the final stages of labor began, Ember's behavior became even more extraordinary. He lowered his great head until his golden eyes were level with Rebecca's, providing visual focus during the most intense moments. His scales displayed the gentle pastels that had become their private language for love and protection, while his purring provided a steady rhythm that seemed to guide her breathing. "I can see the head," Dr. Stone announced. "One more push, Rebecca." The moment Rebecca's daughter emerged into the world, crying lustily in the warm glow of Ember's bioluminescence, something magical happened. Ember's scales exploded into colors Rebecca had never seen, brilliant golds and silvers that seemed to dance with joy across his entire body. His purr deepened into harmonious tones that somehow made the baby's cries soften into contented sounds. "Hello, Lucy," Rebecca whispered, holding her daughter for the first time. Ember's response to hearing the baby's name was immediate. His scales settled into a warm, golden glow, and he produced a sound that could only be described as a gentle trill of greeting. When Lucy's tiny hand emerged from her blanket, Ember carefully extended one massive claw, allowing the infant to grasp it with surprising strength. The sight of her newborn daughter holding onto Ember's claw while gazing up at his glowing scales with wide, curious eyes made Rebecca cry with emotions she couldn't name. This massive apex predator, who could have destroyed the entire outpost with minimal effort, was introducing himself to the newest member of their family with infinite gentleness. "Remarkable," Dr. Webb breathed, documenting everything with his recorder. "Look at his body language. He's recognized the infant as part of his protection unit, interspecies adoption behaviors occurring in real time." Over the following hours, as the storm gradually subsided and Rebecca recovered from delivery, Ember's role as guardian became even more apparent. He maintained perfect temperature control in the medical bay. His internal heat adjusted to keep Lucy comfortable. His position never varied, always between the baby and any potential source of danger, yet close enough that his presence provided comfort. When Lucy cried, Ember's response was immediate, the subsonic humming that had soothed Rebecca during pregnancy transformed into frequencies that seemed specifically calibrated for infant comfort. Lucy would quiet almost instantly when Ember began his gentle purring, her tiny face relaxing into peaceful sleep. He's not just protecting her, Rebecca realized, watching Ember carefully adjust his breathing to avoid creating drafts near Lucy's makeshift crib. He's bonding with her the same way he bonded with me. This isn't just protective instinct, it's love. Dr. Stone's medical scans confirmed what Rebecca suspected. Ember's stress hormones had actually decreased since Lucy's birth, while his oxytocin equivalent levels had spiked dramatically. The dragon was experiencing the neurochemical changes associated with parental bonding despite the complete biological impossibility of such a connection. "This data will revolutionize our understanding of interspecies relationships," Dr. Stone said quietly. "Ember isn't just accepting Lucy as part of your family unit. His brain chemistry is literally adopting her as his own offspring." As dawn broke through the clearing storm clouds, Rebecca held Lucy close while Ember maintained his protective vigil. His scales glowed with contented gold, occasionally shifting to alert silver when he detected sounds from outside, but immediately returning to peaceful colors when he confirmed no threats existed. "You're going to be the most protected child in the galaxy," Rebecca told Lucy, who seemed to find Ember's gentle breathing patterns perfectly suitable for sleeping. Ember's response was a color display that had become familiar. The complex pattern that meant family, combined with new variations that seemed to specifically indicate, protect the small one. Rebecca realized she was witnessing the birth of something unprecedented in human-alien relations. A truly mixed family, where species differences had become completely irrelevant compared to the bonds of love and protection. The colonial authorities would have their work cut out for them if they wanted to separate this family, Rebecca thought, watching Ember carefully position his massive wing to shade Lucy from the brightening sunlight. No regulation or protocol could break bonds forged through such pure emotional connection. Outside, the planet's twin suns painted the sky in brilliant colors that almost matched the joy radiating from Ember's scales as he watched over his adopted human family. 18 months had transformed Lucy from a helpless infant into an adventurous toddler whose fearless exploration of the research outpost gave everyone except Ember heart attacks. The dragon had grown even larger, now requiring the main hangar for comfortable sleeping, but his gentle behavior around Lucy had become legendary throughout the Colonial Research Division. Every morning brought new demonstrations of Ember's incredible adaptability to child-rearing. Lucy would wake before dawn, babbling in her crib until Ember's massive head appeared at the nursery entrance. His scales would shift to the warm gold that meant pure happiness while he produced the gentle trilling sounds that had become Lucy's favorite wake-up call. "Ember!" Lucy would squeal, reaching her tiny arms toward him. His response never varied. Careful positioning of his great head near the crib so Lucy could pat his snout while he purred contentedly. Rebecca would find them like this most mornings, dragon and toddler conducting their private conversation in a mixture of human babbling and dragon vocalizations that seemed to make perfect sense to both participants. The day Lucy took her first steps, Ember's protective instincts reached new heights. She had been pulling herself up on furniture for weeks, while Ember positioned himself strategically around the room like a massive living safety net. When Lucy finally let go of the couch and took 3 wobbling steps toward Rebecca, Ember moved in perfect synchronization beside her, his bulk providing a gentle barrier between the toddler and any hard surfaces. "Good girl, Lucy," Rebecca encouraged. Arms outstretched, Lucy's 4th step sent her tumbling, but instead of hitting the floor, she found herself caught against Ember's warm scales. His reflexes had been faster than humanly possible, cushioning her fall while his scales shifted to encouraging colors. Rebecca realized that Lucy had never experienced a truly hard fall in her entire life. Ember's presence made serious injury virtually impossible. The research team had become accustomed to scenes that would have seemed impossible. Just 2 years earlier, Lucy would nap, curled against Ember's side, using his warm bulk as a living blanket while he remained perfectly still for hours. When she wanted to explore, Ember would follow at a distance that provided protection without restricting her natural curiosity. His ability to anticipate danger had prevented countless accidents. "Watch this," Dr. Webb said during one of their documentation sessions. He rolled a ball toward the edge of a raised platform where Lucy was playing. Before the ball could fall and potentially startle or injure the toddler, Ember's tail moved with surgical precision, redirecting the ball's path back toward Lucy, without her even noticing the intervention. "He's not just reacting to dangers," Dr. Stone observed. "He's predicting them. His spatial awareness includes Lucy's probable movements and potential consequences. Cognitive modeling at that level suggests intelligence comparable to advanced AI systems." Rebecca's documentation had evolved far beyond simple behavioral observations. She was now recording evidence of genuine interspecies parenting that challenged every assumption about biological limitations. Ember had somehow learned to modify his massive size and incredible strength to provide perfect childcare. His tail could delicately pick up dropped toys. His claws could carefully straighten Lucy's blankets, and his temperature regulation kept her comfortable in any environment. The most remarkable development was communication. Lucy had begun responding to Ember's color changes as if they were a visual language she inherently understood. When his scales showed alert silver, she would stop whatever potentially dangerous activity she was engaged in. When he displayed the warm golds of affection, she would run to him for cuddles that involved careful climbing across his massive form. "Ember mine," Lucy declared one afternoon, wrapping her tiny arms around as much of his snout as she could manage. His response was a color display of such pure joy that even Dr. Stone, typically focused on scientific objectivity, had to wipe tears from her eyes. The dragon's scales rippled, with every shade of gold and silver, while he produced the deep purring sound that meant complete contentment. External threats to the outpost brought out different aspects of Ember's protective nature. The planet's wildlife had learned to avoid the research facility entirely after several encounters with an extremely territorial dragon. When a pack of the local predators, creatures the size of earth wolves but with crystalline armor, approached too close to the perimeter, Ember's response was swift and decisive. Rebecca watched from the observation deck as Ember positioned himself between the outpost and the approaching pack. His roar shook the building's foundations while his scales blazed with warning colors that could be seen from kilometers away. The predators took one look at the massive dragon standing protectively over his territory and decided to find easier prey elsewhere. Lucy never even woke up from her nap. Rebecca noted in her research log, "Ember's protective behaviors are calibrated to eliminate threats without disturbing the family members he's protecting." Colonial Command's interest in Rebecca's work had grown exponentially, as her reports documented unprecedented levels of interspecies cooperation. Her findings were being studied by xenobiologists across human space, with several research teams requesting permission to observe Ember's parenting behaviors directly. Administrator Cross had eventually conceded that separating Rebecca from Ember would damage the most valuable research project in colonial history. Her initial concerns about safety had been thoroughly addressed by months of documentation, showing that Lucy was statistically safer with Ember than she would be in any standard childcare facility. Dr. Hayes, "Your work is being reviewed at the highest levels," Cross informed her during their monthly communication. "The implications for future human-alien relations are extraordinary. We're seeing evidence that emotional bonds might be more important than biological compatibility in forming beneficial partnerships." Rebecca understood the broader significance of what they were documenting. Humanity's expansion into the galaxy had always assumed that other species would need to be conquered, negotiated with, or avoided entirely. The possibility that emotional connection could create genuine partnerships opened entirely new approaches to interspecies relations. But for Rebecca, watching Lucy attempt to teach Ember how to stack blocks, while he patiently allowed her to climb all over his massive form, the theoretical implications mattered less than the daily reality of their impossible family. The dragon who carefully moved building blocks with the tip of his claw, responding to a toddler's enthusiastic but incomprehensible instructions, represented something more valuable than diplomatic breakthrough. He represented love in its purest form, the willingness to completely adapt one's nature to protect and nurture another being, regardless of species barriers. Lucy's fearless affection for Ember, and his infinite patience with her childish demands, proved that family bonds could transcend any biological limitation. "Ember good dragon," Lucy announced during one of their play sessions, patting his snout with sticky fingers from her afternoon. Snack, his response was the color pattern that meant "protect small one always," combined with the gentle purring that had become the soundtrack of their daily life together. They were writing a new chapter in the story of what was possible when love bridged the gap between worlds. The morning Lucy spoke her first complete sentence, she was sitting cross-legged in front of Ember's massive head, carefully arranging her collection of colorful building blocks between his front claws. 3 years old and fearlessly independent, she had developed her own daily routine that always included extended conversations with her dragon guardian. "Ember is my gentle giant," Lucy announced clearly, looking directly into his golden eyes. "He keeps me safe and warm." The dragon's response was immediate and overwhelming. His scales erupted in the most brilliant display Rebecca had ever witnessed. Waves of gold and silver that seemed to dance across his entire body while he produced a sound that combined purring, trilling, and something entirely new. The joy radiating from him was so intense that even the monitoring equipment registered the emotional spike. Rebecca felt tears streaming down her face as she watched Ember carefully lower his great head until Lucy could wrap her small arms around his snout. His scales settled into the warm gold that meant deep love, while his gentle breathing created a rhythm that Lucy seemed to find perfectly soothing. "Did you record that?" Dr. Stone asked, her own voice thick with emotion. "Every second," Dr. Webb confirmed. "The neurological scans show Ember's brain activity, spiking in regions associated with parental bonding and emotional reward. His response to Lucy's verbal recognition is identical to what we'd expect from a biological parent hearing their child's first words." 3 years of documentation had produced a research archive that was revolutionizing humanity's understanding of interspecies relationships. Rebecca's work had become the foundation for an entirely new field of study, emotional xenobiology, with universities across human space offering courses based on her findings. The data was remarkable, but the daily reality was even more extraordinary. Lucy treated Ember as a combination of parent, playmate, and personal guardian. She would climb fearlessly across his massive frame, slide down his wings like playground equipment, and curl up against his warm scales for afternoon naps that often lasted for hours. Ember's adaptations to child rearing had evolved far beyond anything Rebecca had initially imagined. He had learned to modulate his internal temperature to exactly match Lucy's comfort needs, to move with such precision that he never accidentally jostled her even during sleep, and to anticipate her needs with an accuracy that bordered on telepathic. "Ember, I want to fly," Lucy announced one morning, pointing toward the open hangar doors where the planet's twin suns painted the sky in brilliant colors. Rebecca's heart stopped. The question of whether Ember could safely carry Lucy had been debated for months in both research circles and colonial command meetings. His flight capabilities were well documented, but no human had ever ridden a dragon in anything other than emergency situations. Ember's response was immediate but careful. His scales shifted to questioning silver while he looked directly at Rebecca, clearly seeking permission. The intelligence behind his golden eyes was asking whether this next step in their relationship was acceptable to the human parent. "What do you think?" Rebecca asked Dr. Stone, who had become the unofficial safety coordinator for all activities involving Lucy and Ember. "The physiological data suggests it's completely safe," Dr. Stone replied. "Ember's spatial awareness and protective instincts make him statistically safer than any mechanical transport we've tested. His flight stability and his ability to maintain precise control is extraordinary." Rebecca looked at Lucy, who was gazing up at Ember with complete trust and excitement, then at the dragon whose every behavior pattern had demonstrated absolute devotion to her daughter's safety. Supervised flight only, short duration, perfect weather conditions. Ember's scales blazed with excitement as he carefully positioned himself to allow Lucy to climb onto his back. Rebecca helped secure her daughter with a specially designed harness that attached to Ember's natural ridge scales, while Dr. Webb and Dr. Stone monitored from the ground using portable scanners. The moment of takeoff was breathtaking. Ember rose into the air with such smoothness that Lucy might have been sitting in the most advanced shuttle rather than riding a living creature. His massive wings beat in perfect rhythm while his flight path remained absolutely stable, designed entirely around his precious passenger's comfort. "Higher, Ember," Lucy called out, showing no fear whatsoever. Rebecca watched through binoculars as her daughter experienced the impossible, soaring through alien skies on the back of a creature that had once been considered humanity's potential enemy. Lucy's laughter echoed across the landscape, while Ember's scales glowed with colors that seemed to reflect pure happiness. When they landed 20 minutes later, Lucy was bubbling with excitement while Ember appeared to have thoroughly enjoyed the experience. His scales showed deep satisfaction, and his first action was to carefully help Lucy dismount before nuzzling her with the gentleness he had perfected over 3 years. "Again tomorrow?" Lucy asked hopefully. Ember's affirmative trill left no doubt about his answer. 6 months later, Rebecca stood before a gathering of colonial authority officials, xenobiologists, and diplomatic specialists from across human space. Her presentation had been scheduled for an hour but had extended to nearly 3, with questions and requests for clarification that demonstrated the revolutionary nature of her findings. "In conclusion," Rebecca said, gesturing toward the holographic display showing Lucy riding confidently on Ember's back, "our research demonstrates that humanity's greatest strength in galactic relations may not be technological superiority or military capability. Instead, our unique capacity for emotional bonding appears capable of creating partnerships that transcend traditional species barriers. Administrator Cross, who had initially opposed Rebecca's work, now stood as one of its strongest advocates. Dr. Hayes, your documentation of the human-dragon relationship has already influenced first contact protocols across 17 sectors. Are you prepared to expand this research to other species? Rebecca smiled, thinking of Lucy and Ember sharing their afternoon nap back on Kepler 442c. With proper safeguards and willing participants, I believe we've only scratched the surface of what's possible when love bridges the gap between worlds. The implications extended far beyond academic research. Colonial expansion policies were being rewritten to emphasize partnership over conquest, with Rebecca's work serving as proof that emotional connections could create alliances stronger than any military treaty. The dragon who had once been a dying hatchling in a cave had become the foundation for humanity's new approach to galactic citizenship. That evening, Rebecca video called home to find Lucy and Ember in their usual spot overlooking the planet's smaller moon. The 3-year-old was chattering about her day, while Ember listened with the patient attention he had shown since her birth. His scales glowed with contentment as Lucy described her latest adventure, and his gentle purring provided the perfect background for her excited storytelling. "Mama, when are you coming home?" Lucy asked. "Ember misses you." Looking at her impossible family, a human child and an apex predator who had chosen to become her guardian, Rebecca felt the same wonder that had sustained her through 3 years of revolutionary research. They had proven that love truly was universal, capable of creating bonds that no biological barrier could prevent. "Soon, sweetheart," Rebecca promised. "Very soon." As she ended the call, Rebecca realized that her greatest discovery wasn't just scientific. It was deeply personal. She had learned that courage to love without boundaries could transform not just individual lives but the entire future of interspecies relations. Lucy's fearless affection for Ember and his infinite devotion to her protection represented humanity's gift to the galaxy, the proof that family bonds could make anything possible. The universe was vast and full of unknown species, but watching Lucy sleep peacefully against Ember's warm scales while he maintained his eternal vigil, Rebecca knew that love would always find a way to bridge any gap between worlds.